Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
So we're seeing it everywhere, right? This LVT stuff. Luxury vinyl tile.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like it's all the rage for folks who want a floor that's stylish, but, can actually handle some real life.
Yeah, it's definitely having a moment, isn't it? And for good reason, I think. I mean, it kind of hits that sweet spot, doesn't it? Like, it can look really good, mimicking wood or stone even, but it's also way more practical for a lot of people than those, pricier and maybe more fragile options.
Absolutely. So we get it. It's trendy. It's tough. It's often pretty budget friendly too.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, right? Picking it out, that's only half the battle. What really makes a difference is the installation. How do you actually get it from those boxes to a floor that looks amazing and lasts? And that's what we're going to really unpack today.
You got it. No, just admiring the finished product here. We're going to roll up our sleeves and get into those key steps that'll make or break your LVT project. Whether you're tackling it yourself or hiring a pro, we want to give you the knowledge to, avoid the common pitfalls and end up with a floor you're going to love for years to come.
That's the goal, right? And to do that, we're going to tap into a fantastic resource. A homeowner who's been there, done that with LVT, they've learned a lot along the way. And we're going to break down their top tips, their kind of aha moments, and even some of the things they wish they'd done differently.
I love that because it's so practical, right? It's coming from someone who has had their hands dirty, so to speak, and can give us that real world perspective.
Exactly. All right, so where do we begin with LVT? Well, it all starts with what's underneath it all, right? The subfloor.
The subfloor, the unsung hero of any flooring project.
Right. LVT has this reputation for being pretty forgiving compared to, say, hardwood or ceramic.
Right.
But our source is really adamant about this. Don't underestimate the subfloor. Even with LVT, it matters.
Oh, absolutely. LVT can handle some minor imperfections, but if you've got major unevenness down below, that's where the trouble starts. You see planks not sitting, flush gaps that appear over time. It can even put stress on those locking mechanisms if you're using a click lock system.
So, okay, what are the must-dos for subfloor prep, according to our LVT guru? Well, first up, cleanliness.
Yeah.
It sounds so basic, but they swear by it.
Makes sense though, right? I mean, think about it. If you've got any dust or debris left on that subfloor, it can actually mess with the adhesive if you're doing a glue down LVT.
So it's not just about having a clean-looking floor, it's actually impacting how well the LVT adheres.
Exactly. And even with click lock, those little particles can create tiny variations in height that might not seem like a big deal at first, but over time, well, they can become noticeable or even cause squeaks.
Oh, I hate that. And of course, you don't want any trapped moisture under there either.
No, that's just asking for trouble, mold, mildew, warping, you name it.
So vacuum and mop, folks, before you even think about opening those LVT boxes.
Absolutely. Get that subfloor spotless.
Okay, next up, leveling. Our source talks about using self-leveling compound for concrete floors that have dips and sanding down high spots on wooden subfloors.
This is where putting in a little extra work can pay off big time in the end. If you've got those dips in the subfloor, the LVT plank above doesn't have as much support, and that can lead to flexing or even damage to those locking edges over time.
Interesting. So it's not just about a smooth surface, it's about that support too.
You got it. And sanding down high spots, well, that just creates a nice even plane for the LVT to sit on. It's all about laying the groundwork for success.
Makes sense. Then we've got the moisture check. Our homeowner particularly stresses this for basements and kitchens. They really emphasize using a moisture meter to make sure the subfloor is nice and dry.
Smart move, especially in those areas prone to moisture. I mean, even though LVT itself is often water resistant, you don't want that trapped moisture underneath causing problems.
So the LVT might be fine, but the subfloor could be a breeding ground for issues if it's not dry.
Exactly. You're just setting yourself up for potential headaches, warping mold, mildew, you name it.
And finally, for subfloor prep, we've got underlayment.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Our source mentions that some LVT actually comes with a pad already attached, which is super convenient.
Oh, nice. One less thing to worry about.
Right. But if your LVT doesn't have it, you'll need to choose the right underlayment. And it's not just about cushioning. It can actually impact how the floor feels underfoot and even how much noise it makes.
So it's like a comfort and soundproofing layer.
Exactly. Some underlays even offer things like thermal insulation, or they can help smooth out very minor imperfections in the subfloor.
Handy. Now, our source did share a little story about their kitchen install. Apparently, they were a little too eager to get started and didn't spend as much time checking the subfloor as they should have.
Oh no, what happened?
Well, they ended up with a noticeable creak in one spot. every time someone walked over it.
Oof, it's got to be annoying.
A constant reminder to not rush the subfloor prep.
Lesson learned. Always better to be thorough up front than have to deal with those little annoyances later.
Truth. Okay, so let's move on to what happens before you even start clicking or gluing those LVT planks together. Acclimation.
Acclimation. That's just letting the LVT hang out in the room for a bit, right?
Right. Might seem like a pointless waiting game, but our source insists it's crucial for a smooth installation.
I can see why. I mean, it's got to adjust to the temperature and humidity levels in the house, right? Kind of like when you travel and you need a day to adjust to a new climate, the LVP needs to acclimate to its new environment too.
Exactly. So unpack the flooring, leave it in the room where it's going to be installed for at least 24 to 48 hours.
Makes sense. Give it time to settle in.
Now, our source also emphasizes keeping the room temperature consistent during this acclimation period, ideally between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, big temperature swings could cause problems, I imagine.
That's what they say. It can mess with the acclimation process, so no cranking the heat or the AC while the LVT is adjusting.
Got it. Consistent and comfortable.
And here's a little pro tip from our experienced homeowner. When they were installing LVT in their hallway, they made a point of stacking the boxes flat.
Flat. Why is that?
They felt like it helped prevent any shifting or warping after the floor was down. I guess stacking flat allows for better airflow around the planks compared to leaning them against a wall or something.
Ah, I see. So it's about promoting even acclimation across the whole batch of flooring.
Exactly. Okay, so theme 3, the blueprint.
The blueprint. Are we
Yeah.
talking about like actual blueprints now?
Not quite, but we are talking about measuring your space and planning that layout.
Right.
Because, LVT often tries to mimic wood or stone, and getting that seamless professional look requires some forethought.
Oh, for sure. You don't want to just start slapping down planks without a plan. That's how you end up with a floor that looks like a patchwork quilt.
Exactly. So first things first, accurate measurements. Our homeowner really stresses this grab that tape measure, double check those dimensions before you even think about making a cut.
It's all about precision, right? Even a small error in your measurements can really mess things up as you go along. You might end up with short pieces at the end or having to force planks into spaces they don't really fit.
And then it just looks wonky.
Exactly. So measure twice, cut once, as they say.
Wise words. Next up, visualizing the finished floor before you commit to anything.
Ah, you mean like a dry run?
Precisely. Lay out the planks without clicking them together or gluing them down just to see how everything fits and flows.
Smart move. That way you can catch any potential issues like, ending up with a tiny sliver of a plank at the edge of the room.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And speaking of those small pieces, our homeowner specifically advises against having narrow end pieces whenever possible.
Yeah, those can look really awkward, especially if you're going for that, seamless wood or stone look.
So play around with the starting point of your first row of planks. You can often adjust it to avoid ending up with those skinny pieces at the edges.
Good tip. It's all about those little details making a big difference.
Absolutely. Now, when it comes to the actual pattern of the planks, the advice is to stagger the joints like a brick wall, offsetting them.
Ah, that makes sense. It's more visually appealing, but it also adds structural strength, right?
You got it. Especially with those floating click lock systems, staggering the joints helps prevent long continuous seams that might be more prone to separating over time.
So it's both practical and aesthetically pleasing. I like it.
Now, our source actually shared a funny story about this. Their partner, who's super detail-oriented, went so far as to use chalk to mark out the entire layout on her living room floor before laying a single plank.
Wow, that's dedication.
Right. It might seem a bit extreme, but they swear it helped them avoid any awkward cuts and resulted in a perfectly even layout.
I mean, I get it. Those chalk lines act like a guide, keeping everything in check. It's like having a blueprint right there on your floor.
Exactly. Okay, so let's get into the installation itself. Theme 4, choosing your method of attack, or rather your installation method.
Okay, so we're finally getting to the part where we actually put the floor down.
We are. Our source walks us through the 2 main types of LVT installation, click lock and glue down.
And which one you choose, well, it really depends on the specific LVT you've got, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They really emphasize that knowing which type you have is crucial. You need to follow the manufacturer's instructions to a T.
Right, because trying to install a click lock floor as if it were glue down or vice versa, well, that's a recipe for disaster.
And probably avoided warranty too.
Exactly. So read those instructions, people.
So for click lock LVT, it's all about that satisfying click as each plank locks into place. Our source reminds us to use spacers to maintain that expansion gap around the perimeter and to gently tap the planks with a rubber mallet if needed.
The trusty rubber mallet. Always a good tool to have on hand.
Right. You want that tight, secure fit, but you don't want to damage the planks either.
Exactly. A gentle persuasion.
Now, for glue-down LVT, it's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, glue-down can be a little trickier.
Our source stresses the importance of using the adhesive that's specifically recommended for your LVT, spreading it evenly, and then letting it become tacky before laying the planks.
The tacky stage. That's key, right? Too wet, and the planks can slide around too dry, and they won't stick properly.
Exactly. And once the planks are down, using a heavy roller is essential to ensure good adhesion.
Yeah, that roller really helps to press out any air bubbles and make sure the LVT is making full contact with the adhesive.
So it's not just about slapping it down. You've got to really make sure it's secure.
Exactly. Now, our source actually chose to use glue-down LVT in their bathroom.
Interesting. Any particular reason?
They wanted that extra water resistance, I guess. It's a moisture-prone area, so it made sense for them.
Smart. Although they did mention that glue-down was a bit more challenging to install than click-lock.
Yeah, it can be a bit more finicky, but sometimes those trade-offs are worth it for that extra peace of mind.
For sure. All right, we're on to our final main theme, giving your floor some breathing room.
Breathing room. Is this about ventilation now?
Not quite. We're talking about those expansion gaps.
Oh, right. Didn't we mention those earlier?
We did. And even though LVT doesn't expand and contract as much as natural wood, our source is adamant about leaving those gaps.
It's still important even with LVT.
Absolutely. Because even though the movement is minimal, it's still there. Those gaps allow for that slight expansion and contraction without putting stress on the planks.
So it's about preventing buckling or warping, basically.
You got it. So use spacers to create a gap of about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch around all the walls, doorways, and any fixed objects.
Spacers are your friends during LVT installation. They'll save you from a lot of headaches down the road.
And a good rule of thumb is it's better to have a slightly larger gap that you can cover with trim than to have no gap at all.
Right, because once that floor is down, you can't really go back and add those gaps.
Exactly. Our homeowner also warns against installing LVT under heavy furniture that could restrict that natural movement.
That makes sense. If you've got a big, heavy sofa sitting directly on the LVT, it's basically pinning it down.
And that can cause stress and potentially damage as the floor tries to expand and contract.
So give it space to breathe.
And finally, to hide those gaps and give the room that polished look, use some nice trims and moldings.
Trims and moldings, they're the finishing touch.
They really pull it all together.
And they also help protect the edges of the flooring, which is always a good thing.
Now, speaking of expansion gaps, our homeowner almost made a major blunder in their dining room. They completely forgot about the gap along one wall. Luckily, their partner caught it just in time.
Oh, wow. That was a close one.
It could have been a disaster. It just goes to show how easy it is to overlook those seemingly minor details.
It's a good reminder to always double-check everything before you call it a day.
Absolutely. All right, so let's recap those 5 key lessons for successful LVT installation, all based on our homeowner's experience. First up, proper subfloor prep is non-negotiable. Second, acclimate your LVT before you do anything else. Third, measure and plan your layout carefully. Fourth, use the right installation method for your specific LVT. And fifth, don't forget those expansion gaps.
It's all about taking those extra steps to do it right. The difference between a so-so LVT floor and a truly great one can come down to those seemingly small details.
Truth. And on that note, here's something to ponder. As you're planning your own LVP project, think about which of these 5 areas might be the most challenging for you and why.
Yeah, that's a great question to ask yourself. Is your subfloor in good shape? Do you live in a climate with extreme temperature swings? What's the layout of the room like? All these things can impact your approach.
It's all about being proactive and anticipating potential challenges before you even open that first box of LVT.
Forewarned is forearmed, as they say.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into LVT installation. Until next time, happy flooring, folks.
Happy flooring.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.